Welcome to the channel Coin NEXA VAULT, and today we're diving into a coin that might very well be hiding in a forgotten jar on your dresser right now, a piece that circulated through the very hands of Americans during one of the most transformative decades of the late 20th century. The 1993 D. Kennedy half dollar, a coin that many of you remember receiving in change, perhaps flipping casually at a gas station counter or finding tucked away in a birthday card from a grandparent, now commands documented auction results that would make even the most seasoned numismatist pause and reconsider every half dollar they've ever passed along without a second glance. At a heritage auction sale in 2022, exceptional specimens of this particular date and mint mark combination brought figures that firmly established its place in the upper echelons of modern coin collecting, with PCGS certified examples in the highest grades reaching valuations that reflect both genuine scarcity and sustained collector demand in an increasingly competitive marketplace. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to acknowledge something that you, as experienced collectors, already understand deeply. Not every 1993 D. Kennedy half dollar is going to fund your retirement, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something other than honest numismatic information. What separates the ordinary from the extraordinary in this series comes down to a combination of factors that professional graders at PCGS, NGC, and ANACS have spent decades refining and documenting, factors that include strike quality, surface preservation, luster intensity, and the presence or absence of specific die characteristics that can elevate a common date into a genuinely rare and valuable specimen. The Denver Mint produced these half dollars in 1993 as part of the ongoing Kennedy series that began in 1964 following the tragic assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and by the early 1990s, the half dollar had largely disappeared from everyday circulation, becoming primarily a collector's item distributed through banks and the United States Mint's direct sales programs. This shift in distribution method is actually significant for understanding why high-grade examples of the 1993 D carry the values they do, because coins that never circulated in pockets, vending machines, and cash registers had a dramatically better chance of surviving in pristine condition, yet even among those carefully preserved specimens, the number that achieve the top grades remains remarkably small when you examine the population reports maintained by the major grading services. Here's where the technical details get really interesting, and I suspect many of you will appreciate this level of analysis. The 1993 D. Kennedy half dollar was struck from dies that exhibit several notable characteristics when examined under proper magnification, including the sharpness of Kennedy's hair details, the clarity of the eagle's feathers on the reverse, and the quality of the rim and denticles that frame both sides of the coin. Professional graders look for these elements with extreme precision, and the difference between a coin that grades MS-65 and one that reaches MS-67 or MS-68 can represent tens of thousands of dollars in realized market value, a spread that reflects genuine collector competition rather than artificial inflation. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how the market for this coin has evolved over the past 2 decades, with early sales at Stack's Bowers and Heritage establishing baseline values that have shown consistent appreciation as more collectors recognize the difficulty of obtaining truly exceptional examples. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to Coin NEXA VAULT so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your intelligence and experience as collectors. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution and how certain mint mark combinations from the 1980s have emerged as sleeper investments for those with the patience to hold quality specimens. Moving deeper into the specifics of authentication, collectors should understand that genuine 1993 D half dollars display specific mint mark characteristics that counterfeiters frequently mishandle, including the size, shape, and positioning of the D mint mark beneath Kennedy's truncated neck on the obverse. Details that experienced graders at PCGS and NGC examine under high-powered magnification as part of their certification process. The Denver Mint in 1993 was operating with equipment and processes that had evolved significantly from earlier decades, yet even modern minting technology cannot guarantee perfect strikes on every planchet that passes through the presses, which is precisely why the condition rarity of this date matters so much to serious collectors. When we talk about condition rarity versus absolute rarity, we're distinguishing between coins that are rare because few were made and coins that are rare because few survived in high grades, and the 1993 D. Kennedy $50 falls firmly into the latter category, with total mintage figures that were substantial but preservation rates in top grades that are genuinely limited. The grading populations tell an important story here, one that experienced collectors have learned to read carefully rather than taking headline numbers at face value, because a coin with a reported population of 12 and MS68 represents a fundamentally different investment proposition than one with a population of 1,200 in the same grade. And the 1993 D's numbers at the highest certification levels justify the serious attention it receives at major auctions. Discovery accounts from collectors who have found significant specimens often involve estate sales, old bank rolls purchased decades ago and forgotten in safe deposit boxes, and the occasional remarkable find in circulated change that reminds us all why this hobby maintains its enduring appeal despite the digitalization of modern commerce. What was happening in America when this was minted? 1993 was a year of economic recovery following the recession of the early 1990s, a time when many of you were establishing careers, raising families, or perhaps already deep into collecting with the discernment that comes from years of handling coins, and the $50 produced that year passed through a nation transitioning from the Cold War era into a new global landscape, carrying with them the silent weight of that historical moment. The technical specifications of the 1993 D include the standard copper-nickel-clad composition that had been in use since 1971, weighing 11.34 grams with a diameter of 30.6 millimeters, specifications that remained consistent across the series and that authentication experts use as baseline data when examining potential counterfeits or altered coins. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information, because building a community of informed collectors benefits everyone who values accuracy over hype. The coin we're covering next has grading population numbers that explain its current strong market demand, and I think you'll find the comparison between these two Denver Mint productions particularly illuminating as we examine how minting practices evolved across a single decade. Understanding the minting process explains why certain characteristics appear on the 1993 D that collectors should examine carefully in their own holdings, including die polish lines, hub doubling in specific areas, and the overall sharpness of strike that distinguishes premium specimens from those that merely grade in the middle ranges of the mint state's spectrum. Market demand for this coin has remained robust even during periods when the broader rare coin market experienced softness, a testament to the dedicated collector base that focuses specifically on modern Kennedy $50 and the registry-set competitions that drive prices for the finest known examples to levels that might surprise those unfamiliar with this specialized corner of numismatics. The record for this variety stands at amounts that have been documented through major auction houses with full transparency regarding the specific characteristics that justified those prices, including exceptional eye appeal, virtually flawless surfaces, and the kind of original mint luster that simply cannot be restored or replicated once lost through handling or environmental exposure. For collectors examining their own 1993 D $50, the first step is always careful visual inspection under good lighting, looking for any signs of wear, contact marks, or environmental damage that would preclude high-grade certification, followed by comparison against certified examples to understand the standard that professional graders apply when evaluating these coins. The satisfaction that comes from discovering a genuinely exceptional specimen in one's own collection cannot be overstated, and I know many of you have experienced that particular thrill of recognition when a coin you've owned for years suddenly reveals itself to be something far more significant than you initially realized. What's Ahead involves a discovery story that changed how collectors view an entire series, and the 1986 D. Kennedy $50 represents one of those moments when the numismatic community collectively adjusted its understanding of what was possible within modern minting parameters. Current availability versus collector demand for the 1993 D creates a market dynamic that favors patient sellers who understand the true quality of their holdings, because buyers at the highest levels are willing to wait for and pay substantial premiums for coins that meet their exacting standards. standards that have only become more refined as the grading process itself has evolved. The comparison between auction results from the early 2000s and those from recent years shows a clear trajectory of appreciation that outpaces many traditional investment vehicles, though I always caution collectors to buy coins they love first and consider investment potential second, because the joy of ownership should never be entirely subordinated to financial calculation. Authentication techniques used by professional numismatists include examination of edge reading, weight verification, metal composition analysis through non-destructive testing, and detailed comparison against known genuine specimens, methods that have become increasingly sophisticated as counterfeiting technology has advanced in parallel with legitimate minting capabilities. The historical context behind the Kennedy half-dollar series adds layers of meaning that transcend pure financial valuation, connecting collectors to a pivotal moment in American history and to the ongoing legacy of a presidency that continues to fascinate historians and ordinary citizens alike, a legacy that these small metal discs help preserve and transmit across generations. If you value accurate, well-researched coin information, subscribing to NEXA VAULT ensures you won't miss future discoveries we uncover through our ongoing research and market monitoring, and I am genuinely grateful for every viewer who chooses to support this channel's commitment to substantive numismatic content. The 1993 D. Kennedy half-dollar, in conclusion, represents exactly the kind of coin that rewards knowledgeable collectors who understand the difference between common and exceptional, between circulated and pristine, between a coin that passes through your hands unnoticed and one that commands the respectful attention of the entire numismatic community at major auction events where serious money changes hands based on documented quality and verified authenticity. Next, the 1986 D. Kennedy half-dollar, a coin that emerged from the Denver Mint during a period when many collectors had begun to assume that modern coinage could no longer produce the kind of surprises that defined earlier eras of American numismatics. Yet this particular date and mint mark combination would go on to prove that assumptions spectacularly wrong through documented sales that reshaped market expectations for the entire Kennedy series. At a heritage auction sale in 2021, a PCGS certified specimen of this coin achieved a realized price that firmly established the 1986 D as one of the most significant modern half-dollars in existence, with values reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars for examples that meet the most stringent grading standards. Figures that were verified through transparent auction records and that continue to influence how collectors approach this date when it appears in major sales. The Denver Mint's production of Kennedy half-dollars in 1986 occurred during a period of relatively low overall demand for the denomination, as by the mid-1980s the half-dollar had become essentially obsolete in everyday commerce, used primarily in casino gaming tokens and vending machines rather than circulating through the general economy as it had during the childhoods of many viewers. This reduced circulation actually created favorable conditions for preservation, because coins that were distributed primarily to collectors and institutions rather than passing through countless pockets and cash registers had a significantly higher probability of surviving in grades that would eventually command serious premiums. Though even with this advantage, the number of 1986 D half-dollars that achieved the top certification levels remained extraordinarily limited when examined against total mintage figures. The technical characteristics that distinguish premium 1986 D specimens from ordinary examples begin with the quality of the strike itself, because the Denver Mint in 1986 was using dies and presses that produced notably variable results depending on maintenance schedules, die replacement cycles, and the specific operational parameters in place during different production runs throughout the year. Professional graders at PCGS and NGC have documented that the finest 1986 D examples display exceptional sharpness in Kennedy's hair details, particularly in the waves above the ear and along the temple, areas where dye wear typically manifests first, and where even slight softness can preclude the highest grades. Details that collectors with proper magnification can examine in their own specimens to develop a more nuanced understanding of what separates common from extraordinary. Here's where the technical details get really interesting, and I believe experienced collectors will appreciate the depth we're going into. The 1986 D exhibits several die varieties that have been catalogued by researchers and recognized by the major grading services, including double-die obverse varieties that show distinct doubling in the motto inscriptions and date numerals. Characteristics that can add significant premiums even in grades below the absolute top tier because variety collectors actively compete for verified examples of these recognized errors. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how market perception of this coin shifted over a relatively compressed timeframe, with early sales in the 1990s and early 2000s treating the 1980-60 as essentially a common modern date before population reports and registry set competition gradually revealed the true scarcity of specimens grading MS-67 and above, at which point prices began a sustained climb that shows no signs of reversing. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to NEXA VAULT so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that helps you make informed decisions about your own collections and potential acquisitions. The next coin we're examining involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics that have captivated the numismatic community for decades, and the 1974 Kennedy half-dollar represents one of those rare instances where a production anomaly intersected with historical significance to create something truly extraordinary. Moving into authentication specifics for the 1980-60, collectors should be aware that the Denver Mint mark on genuine specimens displays particular characteristics including its size relative to the truncation of Kennedy's neck, its depth of impression into the die, and its precise positioning that counterfeiters and alterers frequently fail to replicate with sufficient accuracy to pass professional examination, details that the certification services verify through both visual inspection and comparative analysis against known genuine examples in their reference collections. The copper-nickel-clad composition of the 1980-60, identical to that used from 1971 onward, provides a baseline for authentication through weight and specific gravity testing, with genuine specimens weighing exactly 11.34 grams and displaying the characteristic ring when struck that experienced collectors can often identify even without precise instrumentation, though professional grading always includes verified weight measurement as part of the certification process. What was happening in America when this was minted? 1986 was a year of economic optimism, with the stock market reaching new heights and consumer confidence rebounding strongly from the recessionary concerns of the early decade, a time when many of you were building careers, investing in homes, or perhaps already well established in collecting with the kind of seasoned judgment that comes from decades of handling coins and understanding market cycles. The half-dollars produced that year passed through a nation celebrating the centennial of the Statue of Liberty and the restoration of diplomatic relations with nations that had been Cold War adversaries, carrying within their metal the silent resonance of a country transitioning confidently into a new era of global engagement. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information, because the community of informed collectors grows stronger when we share knowledge rather than hoarding it, and I am committed to making NEXA VAULT a resource that respects your experience while delivering insights that even decades of collecting might not have revealed. The coin we're covering next has a documented discovery story that changed how the entire numismatic community understood the potential of modern American coinage, and I think the comparison between this 1980-60 and that remarkable 1974 specimen will illuminate how minting practices and error production evolved across more than a decade of American numismatic history. The grading populations for the 1980-60 tell an important story that experienced collectors have learned to read with sophistication, because raw numbers alone can be misleading without understanding how registry set competition, auction house marketing, and the overall health of the rare coin market influence which coins actually trade at their reported population-based valuations versus those that languish unsold despite theoretically favorable statistics. Market analysis for this coin shows sustained demand from multiple collector constituencies including registry set competitors seeking the finest known examples, variety specialists pursuing recognized double-die specimens, and general Kennedy half-dollar collectors who understand that the 1980-60 represents a genuine condition rarity within a series that many casual observers mistakenly dismiss as entirely common. The record for this variety stands at amounts that have been documented through major auction houses with full provenance details, including the specific characteristics that justified exceptional prices such as perfect surfaces, original mint luster of extraordinary intensity, and the kind of visual appeal that causes experienced graders to pause and examine a coin with particular care before assigning their final assessment. For collectors examining their own 1980 half dollars, I recommend beginning with careful visual inspection under diffuse lighting that reveals surface imperfections without creating misleading glare, followed by magnification to examine die characteristics and any potential variety indicators, and finally comparison against certified examples to develop an intuitive sense of where your specimen falls within the overall quality spectrum. The satisfaction of discovering a genuinely exceptional 1980 in one's collection is compounded by the knowledge that this date was long overlooked by many collectors, meaning that patient and knowledgeable individuals had opportunities to acquire remarkable specimens before the broader market recognized their true significance. A pattern that repeats throughout numismatic history for those with the discipline to research deeply and buy wisely. What's ahead involves a coin that represents the pinnacle of modern-era collecting, a piece that emerged from the Philadelphia Mint in 1974 with characteristics so unusual that it fundamentally challenged assumptions about what was possible within American minting technology of that era. Current availability of high-grade 1980 specimens remains constrained by the simple fact that most examples were either spent into circulation during the limited period when half dollars still changed hands in commerce, or were preserved by collectors who did not necessarily prioritize the kind of careful handling that produces MS-67 and MS-68 examples, meaning that the supply of truly exceptional coins is unlikely to increase significantly regardless of market demand. The price appreciation documented for this coin over the past 15 years has outperformed many traditional investment categories, though I always remind collectors that past performance does not guarantee future results, and that the primary motivation for acquiring any coin should be genuine appreciation for its historical and artistic significance rather than purely speculative financial gain. Authentication resources available to collectors include the major grading services PCGS, NGC, and ANACS, each of which maintains reference collections and employs professional numismatists with specialized expertise in modern coinage. Expertise that has become increasingly valuable as the market for high-grade modern coins has matured and as counterfeiting techniques have grown more sophisticated in response to rising values. The historical significance of the Kennedy half-dollar series extends far beyond the specific dates and mint marks that command premium prices, connecting collectors to the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963, the national grief that prompted the rapid redesign of the half-dollar denomination, and the ongoing cultural significance of a presidency that continues to fascinate historians and ordinary Americans more than 6 decades after its tragic conclusion. If you value accurate, well-researched coin information, subscribing to NEXA VAULT ensures you won't miss future discoveries we uncover, and your support helps us invest in the research tools and market monitoring that make this channel a trusted resource for serious collectors who refuse to settle for superficial content. The 1980 Kennedy half dollar, in its finest certified grades, stands as compelling evidence that modern American coinage can produce genuine rarities that reward knowledgeable collectors with both aesthetic satisfaction and documented financial appreciation, provided those collectors approach the hobby with the patience, research discipline, and respect for authentication that separates serious numismatists from casual accumulators, a distinction that you, as experienced collectors, understand perhaps better than anyone. Next, the 1974 Kennedy half dollar, a coin that emerged from the Philadelphia Mint during an era when many Americans still handled half dollars with the casual familiarity of daily commerce, a time when these substantial silver-colored discs passed through gas stations, grocery stores, and the outstretched palms of children buying candy. Yet within this seemingly ordinary production year lay the foundation for one of the most remarkable documented values in the entire modern American coinage series. At a Stack's Bowers auction in 2019, a certified specimen of this particular date achieved a realized price that permanently altered how the numismatic community understood the potential ceiling for Kennedy half dollars, with values reaching into territory that placed this coin alongside the most celebrated rarities in American numismatics. Figures that were verified through transparent auction records and that continue to serve as reference points for collectors evaluating exceptional specimens of this date. The Philadelphia Mint in 1974 was operating with equipment and processes that had been refined over decades of continuous production, yet even the most experienced minting professionals could not prevent the occasional production anomaly that would eventually transform an ordinary coin into an extraordinary numismatic treasure. And it is precisely these anomalies that dedicated researchers and graders have spent years documenting and cataloging within the 1974 production. What separates the 1974 Kennedy half-dollar from merely common specimens lies in a combination of factors that professional numismatists at PCGS, NGC, and ANACS have identified through painstaking examination of thousands of examples. Factors that include not only the standard condition considerations of strike quality and surface preservation but also the presence of specific die characteristics, planchet anomalies, and striking errors that elevate certain specimens into categories of genuine rarity that command the attention of the entire collecting community. The technical specifications of the 1974 Kennedy half-dollar include the standard copper-nickel-clad composition that had replaced the silver content of earlier years, weighing 11.34 grams with a diameter of 30.6 millimeters, specifications that remain consistent across the series and that provide baseline data for authentication. Though the truly exceptional specimens of this date often display characteristics that extend well beyond these standard parameters into the realm of recognized varieties and errors that have been documented in the major reference works. Here's where the technical details get really interesting, and I suspect many of you will find this analysis particularly compelling given your depth of collecting experience. The 1974 Kennedy half-dollar was struck from dies that exhibit several notable characteristics when examined under proper magnification, including the sharpness of the designer's initials on the truncation of Kennedy's neck, the clarity of the eagle's plumage on the reverse, and the quality of the rim that frames both sides of the coin. Yet beyond these standard grading considerations lie the doubled die varieties, off-center strikes, and other production anomalies that have been recognized by the major grading services and that carry substantial premiums even when they occur on coins that might otherwise grade in the middle ranges of the mint state spectrum. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how the market for this coin has evolved from the 1970s through the present day, with early collectors treating the 1974 as essentially a common date suitable for filling album holes and completing date sets. While more recent market analysis has revealed that the finest known examples and the most dramatic error varieties command prices that would have seemed inconceivable to those early collectors who casually spent these coins into circulation without a second thought. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to NEXA VAULT so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your intelligence and contributes meaningfully to your collecting knowledge. Because building a community of informed collectors benefits everyone who values accuracy over sensationalism in this hobby we all share. Moving deeper into the specifics of what makes certain 1974 Kennedy half-dollars genuinely valuable, collectors should understand that the Philadelphia Mint in 1974 was producing these coins for both circulation and the annual mint sets that the United States Mint sold directly to collectors. A dual distribution system that created two distinct populations with very different survival characteristics in high grades. The coins included in mint sets were handled with relative care and stored in protective packaging, giving them a significant advantage over their circulation-struck counterparts. Yet even among these set-aside specimens the number that achieved the absolute top grades remained limited by factors including die wear, planchet quality variations, and the inherent difficulty of striking coins with the kind of perfection that modern grading standards demand. What was happening in America when this was minted? 1974 was a year of profound national tension and transition, with the Watergate scandal reaching its dramatic conclusion and President Nixon resigning from office in August, a moment of constitutional crisis that many of you lived through and remember with the clarity that comes from witnessing history firsthand, and the half-dollars produced that year passed through a nation grappling with questions of trust, integrity, and the fundamental institutions of American democracy, carrying within their metal the silent weight of that tumultuous historical moment. The economic conditions of 1974 were equally challenging, with inflation rising sharply and the oil embargo creating gas lines and economic anxiety that shaped the financial decisions of millions of American families, conditions that meant few people had the disposable income or the foresight to set aside pristine half-dollars for future generations, which in turn contributed to the scarcity of high-grade specimens that collectors now compete for at major auctions. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information, because the knowledge we share today helps preserve the integrity of this hobby for the collectors who will follow us, and I am genuinely grateful for every viewer who chooses to support NEXA VAULT with their engagement and attention. The grading populations for the 1974 Kennedy half-dollar tell an important story that experienced collectors have learned to interpret with nuance, because the raw numbers reported by PCGS and NGC represent only part of the picture, with the true scarcity becoming apparent when you examine not just how many coins achieved a particular grade but how many of those coins display the kind of eye appeal, originality, and technical excellence that command the highest prices when they actually appear on the market. Market demand for this coin has remained robust across multiple collector constituencies, from registry-set competitors seeking the finest known Philadelphia Mint examples to variety specialists pursuing recognized doubled die and error specimens, to general Kennedy half-dollar collectors who understand that the 1974 represents a pivotal date within a series that continues to attract dedicated attention despite the denomination's disappearance from everyday circulation. The record for this variety stands at amounts that have been documented through major auction houses with full transparency regarding the specific characteristics that justified those exceptional prices, including perfect surfaces free of even the most minor contact marks, original mint luster of extraordinary brilliance and intensity, and the kind of strike sharpness that causes professional graders to pause and examine a coin with particular care before assigning their final assessment. Characteristics that are vanishingly rare in any modern coinage issue and that explain why the finest 1974 specimens command the valuations they do. For collectors examining their own 1974 Kennedy half-dollars, the first step is always careful visual inspection under proper lighting conditions that reveal surface details without creating misleading reflections, followed by magnification to examine die characteristics and any potential variety indicators, and finally honest self-assessment about whether a particular specimen warrants the expense of professional grading given the realistic probability of its achieving a grade that would justify that investment. The satisfaction of discovering a genuinely exceptional 1974 in one's collection is compounded by the knowledge that this coin was produced during an era when most Americans still handled half-dollars with the casual familiarity of everyday currency, meaning that remarkable specimens could have passed through countless hands before finding their way into the protective environment of a knowledgeable collector's holdings, a journey that adds layers of historical resonance to the numismatic significance of the coin itself. Authentication techniques used by professional numismatists include detailed examination of edge reading patterns, weight verification against known standards, metal composition analysis through non-destructive testing methods, and comparative analysis against certified examples and reference collections. Methods that have become increasingly sophisticated as counterfeiting technology has advanced and as the values of genuine specimens have risen to levels that attract the attention of those who would attempt to deceive unwary collectors. The historical context of the Kennedy half-dollar series adds dimensions of meaning that transcend pure financial valuation, connecting collectors to the assassination of President Kennedy in November 1963, the national grief that prompted the rapid congressional authorization of the new design, the artistic legacy of Gilroy Roberts and Frank Gasparo who created the obverse and reverse designs respectively, and the ongoing cultural significance of a presidency that continues to fascinate and inspire more than 6 decades after its tragic conclusion. Current availability of high-grade 1974 specimens remains constrained by the simple reality that most examples were spent into circulation during the final years when half-dollars still changed hands in everyday commerce, or were preserved by collectors who did not necessarily prioritize the kind of meticulous handling that produces the MS-67 and MS-68 examples that now command the market's highest prices, meaning that the supply of truly exceptional coins is essentially fixed and unlikely to increase regardless of how demand may evolve in the coming years. The price appreciation documented for the finest 1974 specimens over the past 2 decades has outperformed many categories of traditional investment, though I always remind collectors that past performance provides no guarantee of future results, and that the primary motivation for acquiring any coin should be genuine appreciation for its historical significance, artistic merit, and the personal satisfaction that comes from owning a well-crafted piece of American numismatic art. If you value accurate, well-researched coin information, subscribing to NEXA VAULT ensures you won't miss future discoveries we uncover through our ongoing research and market monitoring, and your support helps us invest in the reference materials, auction archives, and professional relationships that make this channel a trusted resource for collectors who refuse to settle for superficial content. The 1974 Kennedy half dollar, in its finest certified grades and most dramatic era varieties, stands as compelling evidence that even seemingly common dates within familiar series can harbor extraordinary value for those with the knowledge, patience, and authentication discipline to distinguish the remarkable from the merely ordinary. A principle that lies at the very heart of serious numismatics and that you, as experienced collectors, have undoubtedly encountered many times throughout your collecting journeys. I want to close by expressing my genuine appreciation for your time and attention, and by encouraging each of you to examine your personal collections with fresh eyes, to seek professional authentication when you encounter coins that display the characteristics we've discussed, and to share your own discoveries and experiences in the comments below, because the collective knowledge of this community is one of its greatest strengths. Supporting this channel with a subscription helps us keep delivering the detailed research you deserve, and I'm grateful for every viewer who chooses to join us at NEXA VAULT as we continue exploring the remarkable stories hidden within American coinage. Remember that numismatic knowledge, properly applied, is the most valuable tool any collector possesses, and that the coins we've examined today represent just a fraction of the treasures that remain to be discovered by those who approach this hobby with the respect for history, the commitment to accuracy, and the patient diligence that separates true collectors from casual accumulators. Thank you for being part of this community, and I look forward to bringing you more thoroughly researched content in the videos ahead.